What do we mean when we talk about tense in language? For most of us, we know that there are three tenses: the past, present, and future. We know that some languages go overboard and have way too many grammatical forms to talk about those things. Passé composé, passé simple, passé imparfait, plus que parfait, and that's just the past. I'm looking at you, French. And if we've read some pop science books, we know that some languages don't even have tense, and we may think that we know that this means that speakers of those languages are, I don't know, bad at thinking abstractly about time or something. Or maybe better at it? What if I told you that none of this is strictly true? Most of what you've been taught about tenses is wrong, and half of it isn't even about tense at all, but about a related concept in linguistics called aspect. Today I'm going to tell you about how linguists think about time and action in languages. We'll discuss what tense is, what aspect is, and why linguists make seemingly outrageous claims like English has no future tense. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications, by the way. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is Language Jones. Today's video is all about verbs, but more specifically how languages use different grammatical systems to relate an action to time, and how languages use different grammatical systems to tell us about the status of an action, whether it's in progress, completed, repeated, or what have you. Linguists refer to these as tense, the time thing, and aspect, the completion thing, and lump both of these together in with mood, which definitely deserves its own video, to talk about tense, aspect, and mood systems. First off, some things that get called tense are simply not tenses. They're what linguists call aspect, and we'll talk about them in a minute. Looking at you, passé imparfait. So tense is about when something happens. In fact, the name comes from Old French temps, meaning time, and is unrelated to tension. By the way, the French added the P in temps to make it look fancy and old-fashioned and related to tempus later. Anyway, tense is time. Seems easy enough, right? It's either past, present, or future. But it's not as simple as that. As with every third episode of Star Trek, we have to deal with some temporal anomalies. First, past or future compared to what? We've got two options here, and different languages make reference to either or both of them. Our options are the moment that we're actually talking, makes sense, or some other reference event that's past or future compared to the moment of speaking. Think of sentences in English like, I had already given the tender swindler $40,000 when the police told me he was not who he seemed to be. The police telling me is past tense, but the giving is more paster-er. Similarly, I will have made back all my money selling his clothes online before he realizes the swindled has become the swindler. What tense is realize in? It looks like present tense grammatically. We don't say before he will realize, but that will have and I will have made back all my money selling his clothes online situates me making money both in the future and before that other event. So tense is about when we're talking, when something happens relative to that, and possibly relative to another event. Linguists sometimes talk about event time, reference time, and speech time. So far, so good. But then what about something like, I was practicing my kung fu when I was interrupted by the telephone? Both of these things are past, but they're different. One was ongoing, I was practicing, and one is a more abrupt point in time. This distinction is referred to as aspect. The basic distinction is between whether we think of and treat an action as one undifferentiated chunk, one thing, without thinking about component parts, a point in time, or if we think of an action as ongoing, spanning time and maybe having component parts or unfolding over a period of time that other events can happen in. A time smush. Point in time is usually referred to as perfective, and period of time is usually referred to as imperfective. Think of perfect here like complete. Here's where things get interesting. Some languages, like English, use both tense and aspect. Other languages use only one or the other. So Mandarin, for instance, does not mark tense at all, like at all at all. But what does this mean? Does this mean that Chinese speakers don't understand past or future? No, of course not. That would be ridiculous. Instead, it means past and future are not encoded grammatically on the verb with like a sound, and you have to express them in a different way. So if something happened yesterday, you can just say yesterday in the sentence. Crazy, right? But you don't have to. What you absolutely do have to say is some explanation of the aspect. So if I say, 我穿衣服, the verb 穿 means to put on and has what we call perfective or complete aspect. Feel free to argue about the details in the comments. If you want to say it's an ongoing process, wearing instead of putting on, I have to say 我穿着衣服, where the 着 means it's imperfective, it's ongoing action. I'm not presenting a full paradigm, and sinologists will know that I'm grossly oversimplifying, but hopefully you get the idea. This is why native English speakers have a hard time with Chinese. We keep wanting to say things like, it snowed. Notice how the de is a past marker just crammed onto the verb, or it will snow. And Chinese does not care at all about the when of it, but rather whether we want to talk about it as an ongoing process, where it was snowing and it will be snowing are both expressed the same. Just add time. And it snowed and stopped, or it will start snowing, or it will snow and stop are expressed the same, more or less. This is kind of a simplification. Chinese actually has 4 aspect markers. 在 and zhe for ongoing actions. 我在做 is I'm taking a seat versus 我坐着, I'm sitting or I'm seated. And 过 and 了 for completed actions. 过 is sort of like a have you ever. It happened in the past and it's still relevant to the present. And 了 is for something completed, where completed can also mean a change of state. So 现在下雪, it's snowing right now, versus 现在下雪了, now it's begun snowing where it wasn't before. It's achieved snowing status. Everything you could ever want to say in Chinese has to have either one of those 4 or no marking at all, but you cannot, no matter how badly you want to, ever convey tense in Chinese. Time, yes. Tense, no. You have to just add the time the thing happened. Here's the thing. If you were designing a system to convey both tense and aspect, you'd have a choice. You could use different markers for tense and for aspect, or you could combine them. This is part of why the way we're taught foreign languages is so confusing. The passé imparfait in French, just like the corresponding tense in English, combines both tense and aspect marking. Je lisais, I was reading, both past and continuing action, past and imperfective. And you don't have to use every possible combination of tenses just because they exist in theory. So plenty of languages mark tense, but not all combinations. Lots have something like a past non-past distinction. English is sometimes argued to be one such language, since English speakers don't mark future tense directly on the verb, but instead use a periphrastic construction that comes from a historical verb, meaning intend or desire. I will have lunch tomorrow with a friend. That verb, will, is conjugated in the present. So we make the future by using an additional verb in the present, or non-past, depending on your theoretical perspective. And honestly, more often than not, we use the regular old present to mean the future. Tomorrow I'm having lunch with a friend. When I talk about mood in another video, we'll talk about how would is the word form that corresponds to the past tense of will and should corresponds to the past tense of shall. What's the past tense of the future? In a lot of languages, that grammatical Franken-word exists, but it means something hypothetical or conditional. Russian has past, non-past, and verbs come in aspect pairs. This means that the same verb in English will be expressed with at least 2 verbs in Russian. But also, what is non-past and complete? Well, it ends up meaning that you will do the thing completely. So the pair читать and прочитать is like reading some of versus reading all of a book. Я прочитаю эту книгу is then not I am finishing this book because it's not imperfective, but rather I shall read this book in its entirety. And other languages have all sorts of interesting tenses, aspects, and combinations. Zulu, Brazilian Portuguese, and African American English all have a habitual marker. Ngihla ngifunda, I sit, I read, translates roughly to I stay reading in African American English, and I often read in Standard English. Personally, I love this stuff. But before I learned about the linguistic approaches to it, I absolutely hated it, and it was the bane of my existence. We tend to talk about this stuff all wrong in a way that's perplexing and unhelpful if you want to actually understand and use a new language. If you want to know more, the classic books I recommend as an introduction are Tense and Aspect, both by Bernard Comrie. I've added an Amazon affiliate purchase link in the description. They are, at least in my opinion, very readable. Wikipedia is also a decent start. Another day, I'll discuss the third part of this, mood and modality, speaker perspective on the event. That's where you get the bane of every French and Spanish student's existence, the subjunctive. And there's also a separate kind of aspect, sometimes called actionsart, that is action sort, or type of action, that's its own fascinating world that I'll talk about very soon. It's why giving a speech is an accomplishment in linguistics, but getting slapped is an achievement. There's a great chapter on that in Reamer's Introducing Semantics, purchase link also in the description. So, what's your experience with tense and aspect? Did anyone ever clearly explain them in teaching a foreign language? Got a favorite tense or aspect in a language you're learning? Does this unlock frustrating mysteries in the language you're currently studying? Leave me a comment below. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, please like and subscribe. And if you really like it, leave a comment. It helps with the YouTube algorithms. I have more information in the description, including purchase links for books and for Language Jones merchandise. If you liked this video, I bet you'll love this one. Shout out to my patrons, Johnny Childress, David 1917, James Jagush, Alessio Bona, Anders Torgerson, Beck S., Blake Clay, Dylan Hardwig, Gaming with Clarp Tarp, Peter Kolb, Sarah Shaw Tatoon, Spanish Input, and Stephen Hess.